Well, our next guest says that England, not Russia, is the real culprit in foreign election interference. That, I guess, the mainstream media is just not interested in covering this story, except our next guest, who's an excellent journalist. Journalist Paul Thacker and Matt Taibbi broke a story that shows British advisors to Kamala Harris are working overtime right now to kill Elon Musk's Twitter. I still call it Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, because it is absolutely an affront to their narrative. And this is an unbelievable story that Paul has written along with Matt Taibbi, and we wanted to ask Paul all about it. Paul, welcome to the show. Great to see you again.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Great to have you here. So you and Matt uncovered this remarkable story, and I've not seen any of, I've seen the New York Times covering this, the Washington Post covering this, but British advisors to Kamala Harris working with the Kamala Harris campaign to try to eliminate X, shut it down completely. Can you walk us through what you uncovered here?
So it's a little more nuanced than that. What it is there's a political front group called the Center for Countering Digital Hate, and it's been in the States now for about the last 3 years. And last year, I did a story for Tablet, which is a Jewish conservative online magazine, about who CCDH was, because, so I mostly cover corruption in science and medicine. And the center, I saw the White House in 2021 talking about the disinformation dozen and how they were basically, causing all this anti-vaccine misinformation that was happening in the world. And they were spoken about from the White House. The President Biden referenced them saying that, it said like, they're killing people. In an offhand comment. And I was just like, who is this Center for Countering Digital Hate? I'd spent 10 years in Washington, 3 years in the Senate running investigations. I know how Washington works. And so I was just like sitting back and thinking, how does this unknown nonprofit that I found out was being run by a British political operative who'd worked for members of parliament, how did they get the ear of the White House, like in the podium of the White House? I mean, if you understand anything about Washington, the way it works, there are hundreds of nonprofits, hundreds of advocacy groups, hundreds of think tanks, all trying to get a message out. It's a crowded world of people just yelling and screaming, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me. White papers are coming out every day. And so I started looking at their background, and what I found out was they were a group that was created by a guy named Morgan McSweeney. He is, I would say he's probably like the Karl Rove of England. Super brilliant, genius political strategist. He put together a package that he's now the chief of staff to the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. He put Keir Starmer in the Prime Minister's seat. And what they did was they first had to take out the head of Labour, who was a guy named Jeremy Corbyn, who's he's a lefty. And so they wanted to kick the lefties out and then put in, the center, the conservative wing of the party. So you want to think about, imagine in the States, Bernie Sanders was actually, head of the, Democratic Party, and then along comes someone like, Hillary Clinton and takes him out, right? So she's more on the conservative end. So that's what they did. And what they did was they started attacking him left and right, accusing him of anti-Semitism. They also did this to a website called The Canary, which is a leftist website in the UK that was basically kind of a mouthpiece for a lot of Jeremy Corbyn policies. And what they did was it was constant attacks against the Canary, accusing them of anti-Semitism, accusing them of misinformation, accusing them of hate. None of this stuff was ever found to be true, but what it did was it drove away their advertisers. So they were then able to tank the website by pushing away advertisers because they had no money. Now, surprise, surprise, this is the exact strategy that's being used now against Elon Musk with Twitter. Constant reports coming out accusing him of hate, anti-Semitism, transgender, this. The latest one today is that this came out yesterday in the Washington Post that the community notes doesn't function effectively. And so it's a strategy that was created back in London. What they did was then the guy who's running is a guy named Imran Ahmed. He's a political advisor. He'd worked for several MPs. No one really knows where the money comes from this group, by the way. I mean, this guy was off the payroll for anyone for about 3 years. So no one really knows where the money comes from, but they ended up in the States. And so I've been looking at them, and I've written several stories about them, and got, as oftentimes happens in journalism, You're the guy who becomes the expert on some group, and then a whistleblowers, when they want to come talk to someone, they approach you. And I got approached by people inside CCDH who gave me internal documents. I have hundreds of pages of stuff. I'm still getting leaks today. I was going through their weekly meetings, and their annual priority for this year was kill Musk's Twitter. And the second
it literally
bullet
says
point,
that, like it literally says kill Musk's Twitter.
Kill Musk's Twitter. The second bullet point is advertising focus. So as soon as that was exactly what they'd done to the Canary. And so in my tablet piece, I'd interviewed the former editor-in-chief of the Canary, a woman, very leftist, was totally distraught over what happened to her. She was telling me how terrible it was to be accused of being an anti-Semite when she was like, I'm a person of color, I'm autistic. She's like, who did the Nazis first come after? It was people like me. And now I'm being accused of being a Nazi. I mean, it was really weird. This all happened years prior, and she was almost in tears when I was talking to her. I could hear when you have interviews sometimes, if someone's really in distress, and explain to you how tormented they are by what happened to them. So I knew immediately what this meant. And, we had other internal documents. They had a private meeting this last summer. Center for Countering Digital Hate likes to pretend that they're bipartisan. I mean, anyone in Washington knows that bipartisan means, if you've got 99 Republican senators and, one Democratic senator, then you say, aha, bipartisan, say
right,
the opposite,
right?
Right? 99 Democrats, one Republican, aha, bipartisan. I have also a roster of the meeting they had this last summer. It's all these lefty groups who are through Musk, Media Matters for America, Tech this, Tech that, and then Democratic Party staff. And so they're not bipartisan. They're very much focused on allying themselves with the Democratic Party. The guy who's chair of the board is a man named Simon Clark, who was formerly at the Center for American Progress. So for people who might have forgotten, that's the group that essentially ran Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign. It's a Democratic Party think tank in Washington, D.C. So they're definitely a creature of their Democratic Party, allied group that's pretending to be, nonpartisan and objective, but they're not. They're a political campaign created in London and then brought over here, passed off from the Labour Together, the conservative wing of the Labour Party, and then now they're being used by the corporate wing, the Democratic Party corporate wing, to help them do the exact same thing that they did in the UK.
So is this foreign election interference? If we know the Democratic Party is specifically working with a foreign entity to upend, could you label it as foreign election interference, given the fact that they're going after Elon Musk and they're not, have they found some sort of loophole?
Well, it's really weird. You can see in the internal documents that, for instance, they don't know whether they should. So they're incorporated in the tax code as a C3. So for a nonprofit, that's supposed to be, educational in nature. And at a certain point in time, if you have too much contact with the government, too much contact with Congress, you then need to form what's called a C4, which are these traditional groups that, rich people pour money into for political campaigns. So in their own notes, they're concerned that they might need to form a C4. I can also see that they're spending enormous amounts of time lobbying. It's even we have their tax forms now that I think we're going to release sometime soon. For last year, they took in 20% of their funding for the nonprofit. So they have an office in the UK. They have an office also in DC. The money is passing back and forth. It's very great what's going on right now.
Who's funding them?
And from what we can tell, in their first year in the United States, they took in, according to their tax, it's called the 990s, their tax forms for a nonprofit. They took in about $1.4 million, which if you're not in DC, you don't understand this, but I'll explain this to you. I was talking to a friend of mine who works in the House on the Democratic Party side. Ivy League law graduate, worked for Public Citizen, worked for a major foundation funding leftist groups. Now is a House, congressional staffer. And we're just talking, and I was like, Michael, could you leave the House today with your CV, start a nonprofit, and in your first year raise $1.5 million? And he starts laughing. He says, no. And I'm like, okay, well, that tells you something weird's going on here. So I found
Right.
out through another group, they got a big bolus of money. $1.1 million was one donation. I found out from talking to people internally at CCDH that came from a woman named Aline Kashishian. She's on the board. She's a Hollywood agent. Her clients include Mark Ruffalo. Her partner for her agency is the agent for the singer Selena Gomez. And apparently Selena Gomez also donated $100,000 this last year. So most of the
Hmm.
money has come out of Hollywood, at least initially. Although we know when they were operating in the UK, a lot of the money was coming from wealthy Jewish donors in London.
Interesting. Where has the Kamala Harris campaign commented to you? Have they admitted to this, or have they distanced themselves from this?
They have just kind of totally ignored all this. So the group that is the conservative wing that Morgan McSweeney started, he started a group called Labor Together. And so this was a group that was designed to put the conservative, arm of labor back in charge of the party and then win the prime minister's seat. And that's what they did. So first they pushed out Jeremy Corbyn, they put in Keir Starmer, and then eventually Keir Starmer defeated the conservatives. So it was a two-step process. Get the lefty out, take control of the party, and then defeat the conservatives. And so Keir Starmer is now the prime minister. Labor Together is still around. It's a think tank back in the UK. They have denied working with Center for Countering Digital Hate in a direct statement to us. We know that's false. And I had to send an email to one of the people I was dealing with back in the UK, and I told him, I said, look, DC ain't London. And before you come to my country, baby, you gotta level up. Your game is weak. Their game is so pathetic in the UK compared to the way it's run in DC. You know how it works. You never lie to reporters. You push it away. You put out a statement that because you don't know what they have, but they just blatantly lied to us.
Wow. So is it working? And I guess what's the agenda? What's for those of our audience members that might be sitting there saying, well, why? Why would they want to destroy Elon Musk's Twitter? Why would they want to take it down? Why would they want to remove it from the playing field? Why would they want to take away Elon Musk's Twitter? And then have they been successful in any of the advertisers that they've gone after?
Oh, sure. So their agenda because what also concerned me was they put out this Disinformation Dozen report, right? And one of the people they attacked was RFK Jr., right? Obviously a threat to the Democratic Party, a guy who's running as an old school Democrat. And I could tell very clearly from the beginning, their two targets were RFK Jr. and Elon Musk. Why Elon Musk? Because when Elon Musk bought Twitter, he took away the Democratic Party's censorship toy. They're pissed to this day. They can't censor anymore. There's all this pretense that, Twitter was just, first off, I want to say one thing. There is an idea out there amongst conservatives that they are being censored. That's totally false. Everyone is being censored. The people who are not being censored are those who fall politically in the center left. So if you align very carefully with the corporate DNC, you're fine. As soon as you go to the left a little bit, as soon as you go a little bit too far out of what's that called? Lincoln Project, whatever it's called.
Right. Yeah. Like Hillary Clinton. If you're in the Hillary Clinton lane, then you're fine. If you drift off from that, you see what happened to Bernie Sanders, right? So if you're in that Hillary Clinton lane, you're fine, right?
Right. They're going to kneecap you as soon as you step outside of that. And so that's kind of what's going on right there. And so I thought that was very interesting to figure that out because, again, so think about this. What happened when CCDH came to America is they didn't really need to kill off a left. We don't really have a left at the federal level. You've got Bernie Sanders, who's now back in the fold. You've got the squad, just squawking a lot. They're not passing legislation or anything like that. They're messaging, right? So their immediate threat was RFK Jr. and Elon Musk because, now, look what's going on Twitter right now. People are able to talk about things they couldn't talk about before. I was on another show. I was on the Kim Iverson show. Kim Iverson has a regular part of her show, and then she says, okay, we're taking a break. Okay, we're now going to the Rumble section. Where she kind of knows that there's things that she can't have on YouTube because it'll be censored. That stuff is
we
still
have to do the same thing. We have to do the same thing. If we cover COVID, Yeah, we have to
Right.
say bye-bye to YouTube. We have to go over to Rumble now because we can't cover
Right.
this story on YouTube.
Okay. Yeah. So I didn't know that everyone's doing that. I was just shocked to hear
Yeah.
that from Kim. Because I'm on Twitter, and then I'm writing stuff on Substack, and so I'm not worried about that stuff anymore. So it's just really about power. It's about power. It's about how they're able to control the narrative. The thing that I say is that it took me a while to understand this is, in this industry, the fact checkers don't check facts. The fact checkers check narratives. It's all about trying to control what you can say, what you can learn, and how you can think. That's what it's about.
Have they? And I'll get you out of here on this, Paul. And I don't know that we answered it, but on the advertiser question, have you been able to pinpoint any advertisers that they've been effectively able to eradicate from Elon Musk's Twitter?
Oh, sure. There was a piece I wrote last year for the New York Post about how, I described it as a pincher movement. You could see that, and Elon Musk sued over this last summer, right? You could tell that
Right.
Media Matters for America was putting out these reports, and then you'd see CCDH putting out these reports, and then suddenly Bob Iger at Disney is like, whoa, well, we can't advertise anymore. Like, how can we do this? I mean, I saw this. I'm like, oh, come on. This is totally happening behind the scenes. Bob Iger is a big donor to the Biden administration. His name was floated in the Wall Street Journal to potentially become ambassador to China. I mean, I can see what's going on. Like, I know there's phone calls happening behind. I'm not stupid. I've been doing this for a little bit. I know there's phone calls happening behind the scenes. I know there's communications going on. Maybe it's not totally coordinated, but people understand what you have to when you got a grown person with a high IQ at a certain level, they can see the opportunities happening when it's presented for them, So that's what's going on, And to me, what was really shocking at that time is, again, so I was a science major. I was a history major, not humanities very much, but I was trying to, look back through my understanding of American history, and I was trying to understand a point. Theodore Roosevelt went after the big corporations, right? And Democrats are
Right.
now going after the oil and gas industry, for instance, and Republicans have their own kind of things they go after. I can't think of a time in history, in American history, where a political party targeted an individual. Normally it's industries you go after, but this is very carefully a target on Elon Musk's back. I'll just one other quick thing, when he was being targeted by the, people in Brazil, normally, if an American company is being targeted by people in a foreign country, the White House is going to speak up. State Department is going to speak up on their behalf. It took the White House almost a week to say anything, and they only did so because they went after a separate company. They were angry about what X was doing, and so they targeted Tesla, which is crazy in any way that would happen.
That's the game. It's unbelievable. And you're right. X is honestly, regardless of how anyone feels about Elon Musk right now, the fact that we can actually get information in a way that we wouldn't, because Fox News wouldn't be covering it, MSNBC wouldn't be covering it. We did a whole show yesterday on stuff that you won't see anywhere on the mainstream media because you're able to cover it on X. And it's
Right.
shocking right now. And if they take that away, imagine how this election would be different if X didn't exist. We're talking about voter fraud in Pennsylvania. We're talking about issues with leaked passwords in Colorado on these voting machines. You wouldn't hear any of this information. It's unbelievable. So, I think this is great work by you and Matt. And this is one of the reasons why RFK Jr. tweeted out, follow, of the best journalists in the world right now that you should follow. You, my friend, are one of them. So everyone should follow Paul on X while X still exists. Paul, great to see you. Great work along with Matt on this story, and keep at it, my friend. Great to see you, Paul.
Hey, thanks very much for having me back on again.